like there's two kind of distinct starts for photography, or like where photographers end up being. One is sort of like a wide scope, where you go to a con because you like, you really like anime stuff, and you just take pictures of any costume that you think is cool. And it's a very wide scope. It's like you take pictures of many people, but you don't necessarily know them super well, so you only get a little bit of time with them. And so there's that. I call that sort of hallway photography, where you just, you go around the con, you go to the artist alley, and then you take pictures of whoever you think is cool. And then on the other side, there's a more narrow kind of photography, where you're taking pictures of people who you do know and who you do get to spend time with, and you get to plan out a shot, you get to pick a location, and you get to plan out a whole shoot with them. So in my case, I definitely started out as a hall photographer. My first con was, I think, Anime Expo 2007, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but like I just went there. I barely knew anyone there, and I just went with my camera, and I just took pictures of anything that I thought was cool. And to kind of get a sense of what works and what doesn't eventually. Let's see. Some things to really set apart your photography is using the environment. This was actually a picture of somebody I didn't know, I just met at the time, and in a lot of ways it's important to know the character that you're going to take a picture of. It helps a lot. You don't really have to know, you don't have to know every single anime character, but it really helps a lot in knowing what you want to compose and what kind of mood you want to set for the photo that you take. In this case, I knew the character. This is like, as I said, this was a person I didn't know. I just met them at a time, and I thought they had a really pretty costume. But this is a character who's like a wolf god, and she's very in touch with like nature, and has a lot to do with like being kind of like serene, but also kind of powerful. So as a photographer, you can give your subject commands in a way. You can suggest things to them, and even if you don't really know them, it helps a lot to be polite and just. And in this case, I said, I introduce myself most of the time when I take a picture of someone I don't know, and I say, how can I take a picture? And if there's something in the environment that really helps the photography, I'll usually go like, hey, why don't we go over here? Here's this plant. Let's do something with this. And a lot of cosplayers know how to pose or have a sense for how to pose, but it always helps to just kind of encourage them as to what to do. And I just kind of had her stand next to this potted plant, and the rest usually works out on its own. And if it doesn't, you can reposition them in ways that it would. And honestly, it's hard to say, like, to give you exact tips on how you would reposition a person when you're just taking a cosplay photo. It'll depend. But I think the more that you take pictures, the more that you get a sense for like how a cosplayer interacts with their costume or with anything, it'll help. So yeah, that's one of my tips, is to really be aware of the environment that you first see the cosplayer in, and see what you can use. And sometimes even if it's a hallway, it really helps to just like, it could be like a really sterile hallway, but it really helps to be like, oh hey, can we actually move over this, can we angle this way? So that way you don't have like a bunch of people in the background, and framing it that way really helps what the picture is. Which I guess brings me to another point. Let's see. another important part of cosplay photography and photography in general is really making sure, really focusing the viewer's attention on a certain thing. In the same vein, like, sometimes, like, if you take a photo that's kind of willy-nilly and you have a bunch of, like, a crowd in the background, it gets very distracting, and even if it's not literally distracting to whoever's looking at the photo, it does take away from the single subject, or you know, the group subject of what they are, what their character is, what the mood they're kind of trying to portray, and what they should look like. So, this is actually taken at AOD last year. This is Howell from Howell's Moving Castle, and it was taken in the lobby, and it's pretty, like, you know, the lobby here is, you know, it's nice, but it's not like any super beautiful, like, backdrop. But I positioned him. I made sure he was in front of the wall, so there are no distractions as to what the subject is. And I guess I could go into it later, but another really useful thing is to once you start to focus the viewer's attention is kind of vignetting it, which means to darken areas, especially the edges, but darken areas that are not really important to the photo. I'll go into the post-processing of photos later on, but this is an example of where the subject is extremely clear, right? There's no distractions, and all you see is the cosplay. You see a very good example of the character. You see a very good example of, like, the craftsmanship that went into making the costume, and that's why it really stands out. One thing, here's an example of persona, but here's an example of, like, a lot of times it is hard to get a very clear shot of someone. Like, there's people in the background, and, you know, I kind of wish I would have waited for them to move, or I could have repositioned them. And sometimes you don't get that chance, but when you do get that chance, I think it really helps a lot. I also wanted to, this is also an example of a group cosplay, in the sense that when you take a picture of a single person, the dynamic of how they appear on camera, like, you know, if somebody points a camera at you, you either freeze up or you kind of, like, you know, strike a pose or something. But that relationship between the cosplayer and the photographer actually changes a lot once you have more cosplayers. Like, once you have more people on their side, they feel a lot more comfortable. They're around their friends. So, in a lot of ways, taking a picture of a group cosplay produces really different results. And I would really recommend getting that experience, both as either as a cosplayer or as a photographer, because they're a lot more, when they're in a group, they're a lot more receptive to playing off of each other, to posing, like, more naturally, and like, you know, a single person might kind of feel awkward or nervous or freeze up. And if that's the case, either you know, have their friends nearby and to encourage them, or, like, especially if their friends are in cosplay, that's perfect. And if not, you can just encourage them in all sorts of ways. Like, tell them that they're doing well, and tell them specifically how they should stand so they don't feel awkward. Let's see. I hope this is helpful because I'm kind of all over the place. One thing. What does that mean? another important aspect of photography, just photography in general, is framing, which is to say that what you see through the lens of a camera is, it's very selective, right? Like you have this whole world around you, but you're intentionally just gonna choose only just a small box of it, and where you put that box completely can change the mood of a photo. Here's an example of one that was taken at a gathering, and a cosplay gathering is one where it's like, oh, everyone from the series, in this case, this is a zombie game called Left 4 Dead. Everyone in the series show up at this specific time, and they don't really know each other, and nothing's really planned, and you just have like 30 or 50 people show up all at once, and it is unorganized, but at the same time, there's just a ton of people, and there's gonna be literally 60 photographers crowding around them, because everyone hears about the gathering too. So it's hard to get a good shot. Like the usual, let me give you an example. The usual cosplay gathering shot is gonna be really hard to see anything. They're gonna be really crowded. A lot of cosplay gathering shots are like this, and that's cool, but obviously it's really distracting. You're not really seeing any particular person. It's good in the sense that you're documenting what the gathering is like, and you get to tag all your friends in it. But for the most part, photography, cosplay photography, you do want to narrow the viewer's focus on something very specific, and get them to look at something that to pay attention to something that's really nice that you really want to bring out. So what I chose to do in this one is I got in really close as I could, without kind of getting in anyone's way, and I kind of had to twist around. But the important part is that the cosplayers fill the frame. There's no wasted space. I'm in really close, and it's a lot more dramatic because of that. When you get in really close and you don't waste space, when you don't have a lot of nothing around, it really brings the viewer into what is going on at the time. And I tried my best to make it dramatic. This guy's laughing. Everybody's kind of messing around and laughing, but even just a simple act of getting in really close, getting in really tight, and kind of making it dramatic will bring out this feeling that I wanted to bring out. It was it's a zombie game. It's like a zombie movie. It's people are fighting, and it's really harrowing and dramatic. So as far as framing goes, I would suggest just getting in close, and then if that's too close, coming out of it, because it's really, a lot of times you don't see, you need to get into an extreme view to get a sense for how much something will work. If you're just gonna inch in a foot or two, you won't see results so much as actually getting in really close and then okay, this is too close, let me just inch back. That makes a difference. As a let's see, let me see. I'm pretty sure I have something else from the same type of shoot. Most of the photos from photos were kind of spread out. I'm kind of far back, and I'm trying my best to frame them so it doesn't look like they're at a convention, but it looks more like they're at a scene from whatever game or anime or movie that they're in. Yeah, like I said, framing that matters. Making sure that to the best of your ability, watching where the borders are, watching that you kind of there's actually there's actually a bunch of people here, and you can see their feet, but to the best of my ability, I had to cut them off so it doesn't take away from it being a serious zombie movie type of feel. If you have somebody with a chainsaw and then there's some dude in the back just reading manga or something, that's not gonna that's gonna take away from whatever movie you are trying to set. Yeah, in the same vein, so I guess to go back to basics, it's really important in photography to know what kind of mood you want to set, and that helps a lot in knowing who the character is, or what the character is from. Yeah, this one's pretty cool. This is a character from a visual novel called 999, and there's a scene in the game where she kind of like goes crazy. So I knew this ahead of time, and that's part of knowing the character. It's part of recognizing the character. Also, you find like, I didn't know this person at the time, and they came dressed as this character, and they happened to have this axe as a prop. So it definitely suggests like that kind of like drama. Like this character most of the time is kind of cutesy, and I could go for a very cutesy kind of photo shoot, but like, she's carrying an axe. Let's use that. So so I found a spot nearby that was kind of dramatically lit, where there's really, and by dramatically lit I mean like there's really heavy shadows and stuff. In this case, I think this happened to be near sunset, and the sun was coming through blinds, and you can't always plan for those kinds of things, but you always should be on the lookout for them. So I just positioned her behind these blinds, and it really brings out like this drama of the character, of kind of being psychotic, kind of cute. And so my point is that I achieved that by knowing what kind of mood I wanted to set in the first place. I knew I wanted to set a mood that is more serious, but not overly, not like taking itself seriously. So I believe I told her like, hold up. A lot of times the cosplayer just kind of gets into a pose of their own, and then you suggest additions to that to just make it better, make it a little bit more like what you have in mind. Even if you don't have anything in mind, like sometimes it's like, you covering your face a little, something just now. But I believe at this shoot, I told her to hold up the axe, like a natural place to hold it is kind of lower on your body, so it's to heighten the drama. I told her to hold it closer to her face, and I told her to just like smile just a little bit, like a psychotic kind of crazy, spooky smile. But it's additions like that will come out in the photo, and they'll come out in the cosplay, and then you get a sense for the character coming through, even if you don't really know the character that well, or even if the cosplayer doesn't even know the character that well. You are definitely having a direction and sticking to it is something that's totally going to show up in any photo that you take, or even in any piece of art that you make. One thing, let's see, I'm going to go over cosplay locations. So one thing I found that in taking pictures of cosplayers at conventions, a lot of it is the challenge of just finding a good place, because it either takes place at a hotel or a convention center, and especially in the case of convention center, it could be very sterile, and like not very interesting environments, just like gray walls and stuff. But if you have the time, and if you have the opportunity, especially if you're taking cosplay pictures of your friends, if you have the opportunity, you want to find a nice location. And the location helps in a lot of ways. It really brings out the photo, obviously, in the sense that like it makes it not boring as a whole thing. But another important thing is that it actually puts the cosplayer in a certain state of mind, I think. And I found that like when you give them something to work with, or you give them a place to work with, as opposed to let's pose in front of this concrete wall, the cosplayer is a lot more receptive to like playing around or just playing to the camera. And so I'm gonna kind of share with like a bunch of like easy to find locations that I use a lot. At any convention that includes a hotel, which is pretty much every convention I've been to except for Anime Expo, is there are fancy hotel couches everywhere. Like, it doesn't work with every cosplay, but it works with a lot of cosplays. And having the cosplayer either sit or like just like be on a piece of furniture actually it puts them in a different state of mind, because when they've been cosplaying all day, they're used to just standing and posing in one particular way. But when you give them a different way to just like orient their body, they're actually a lot more like receptive to playing to the camera and to conveying their character more. Let's see. They all happen to be crossing their legs in these. That's the common thing, I guess. But it will depend on the character, and I think it works for females a lot better, because sometimes a lot of times you can like angle it and you can focus on their legs. Like, I mean that you can emphasize that part of their cosplay, which is in a lot of characters it's like a really like prominent part of the costume. But let's see, I guess there's more couches. Another one is pretty easy. Always look for gardens and greenery. So that's a really easy thing to look through and look for. Not every place will have it, but I think, yeah, this con definitely does have a little garden. And again, it's kind of giving the cosplayer an environment to be a character in, and it's giving them an opportunity to get in a certain state of mind that they usually get into. And let's see, I took this photo of Belle from Beauty and the Beast at PMX, and so PMX is at an airport hotel, which is like, it's just super like sterile. It's a hotel that just people stay when they have a flight at 4 in the morning. But if you look around, you'll find like on the third floor, there's just this really tiny garden, and just through the use of framing, I can sort of make that tiny airport garden look like it's a full, like, you know, like a full park. And that includes getting in close and mostly getting close. And see, and also knowing the character of Belle from Beauty and the Beast, like I wanted to convey like this kind of like sereneness, or this idea of just her in nature, like at a picnic, just kind of reading by herself. She brought a book as a prop, just reading by herself, and so, you know, I had her in the greenery. I had her kind of sit in the garden. There's like a little stone thing to sit. Actually, I think she's sitting on a very like industrial-looking light post, but you know, you have to have like covering it. But the point is that like, I don't know. The point is that that you're giving her a location to be a different person in, and to kind of recall what the character would think and act like and should look like. And this actually isn't even cosplay, but it's just kind of like a friend of mine who she just cosplay, but like she's kind of like wanted a little fashion thing and was taking at a con. And in the same vein, it's just like this is a lamppost and there's a shrub next to it, and like even if the person you're taking a photo of isn't like doesn't consider them a model or anything like that, doesn't like have a lot of confidence to pose in a really like strong and confident way. I think just having a thing to be next to, like as opposed to just in the middle of nowhere, just like next to a wall, just having like this lamppost kind of suggests like, you know, like lean up against it, that, or you know, move your, like, twist your hips, or like, you know, put your hand on your hip or whatever, like that really suggests something, this suggests a way for the cosplayer to pose and to orient themselves and to convey anything in the photo. So yeah, that's the second example of really easy location to find and look for. This is more general, finding colors and patterns. You know, sometimes you can't really get very far with like, you know, hall cosplay photography. You just meet them at the, you don't even know them, you want to take a picture of them or they're there. But, you know, you can look around you, and even, this is like a hotel wall, it's red, but I actually wish that, this is an earlier photo I took, but if I had done it better, I would have oriented myself so he was actually really adjacent to the wall, so you don't see this lining in the bottom, and you know what that would do is make sure that his background is just this flat color. It's a very specific you know, photo in that it focuses only on him, and you know, it's not distracting at all. And same with this. This was also just like in a lobby somewhere, but there happened to be like this hotel restaurant with like these little window grate things, and you know, bringing out that color and that pattern makes the photo a lot more interesting than as if it were next to a convention gray wall. One thing, so if it's appropriate for the character, and if you have that kind of opportunity to like bring the cosplayer to a place, you know, I assume you know them or they trust you a lot. One thing that's easy to find pretty much anywhere are stairwells and parking structures. They're isolated places. You're not going to find a big crowd behind you, for one. And in this case, like, you can really control what the lighting is. Even if you don't, you know, even if you're not at a level of photography where you bring your own lighting, a lot of times you can use whatever lighting is around you. And stairwells and parking structures they're, you know, they're not super well lit. They're kind of dark, but at the same time you can use that to your advantage and have your cosplayers pose in really dramatic light. Let's see, I think and then the last thing is more along those lines of just kind of search around, I guess. If you have that opportunity to search around, like in this case, I took this picture of a friend of mine when we actually started taking pictures in a stairwell. It was like a really dusty stairwell at the LA Convention Center, and we just kept walking down like just one more flight of stairs, and it happened to be a dead end where there was this big gate, and behind the gate was just like discarded electronics from the convention center, but that just so happened to be really appropriate for the cosplay. Like it happened like this is cosplay from Madoka Magica, and there's some scenes where like they're in like sort of this abandoned building, and it's very dark and dramatic, and you know, it really helps to just kind of look around and discover locations, and if I was of the mind of like I don't need a location, I could just take a picture of them and their cosplay wherever and it'll look pretty, and that's very true. And you know, I do that a lot too. A lot of people just take pictures wherever they can get a picture. But having the opportunity to search for a location and to bring your cosplayer to a location, actually, a lot of times it gives you an inspiration for how you want to compose a photo and for what kind of mood you want to set. Tell me some more from that Madoka one, actually. Yeah, you get to see more of, it's literally just like an abandoned, dead-end stairwell. But finding this place gave me like a ton of ideas as to how I wanted to compose a photo. Like there's this chain link fence, and that looks like really kind of, you know, dangerous and dramatic at the same time. Like kind of, you know, it's not your usual like sparkly kind of pretty and soft kind of atmosphere that you might get with like a photo shoot where there's like, you know, a cloth background or something. And that alone just adds to what the photo is going to turn out and how the cosplayer is gonna act and feel. Also, I totally found this rope on the ground. It was really dusty and dirty, but I used it anyway, and it was kind of cool. And you know, you can tell like this is a stairwell banister in the back. This is just a basic industrial kind of building stairwell, but by getting in close and by focusing on the right things, for example, like having her look away from the camera and approaching her from at a higher angle, because it's a stair. Because that's one super cool thing about stairwells is that you can be on a different plane than the subject, and that actually brings out a different angle a lot of times. But yeah, it's cool. And then I guess it brings me to like, even if you can't find a location, you can just get in close. A lot of times, that shouldn't be your only option, and I say that because once you get in close, you don't have an opportunity to show off the cosplayer's entire costume, which is a lot of times, you know, what the cosplayer is proud of and what you want to show off. You want to show off the entirety of what they've worked on and what, you know, all the work that went into their costume. But a lot of times, just getting in close and no matter what your background is, it can look really good still. Like you can still get a character from it. You can get drama, and you can get something that is really eye-popping from it. So let's see, another point was knowing what you want to focus on. So yeah, this is one of the first. I took this a few years ago of this friend of mine who's doing this cosplay from one of the Final Fantasy spin-off games, and I didn't really know how to approach it. Like I didn't have a lot of experience in doing photo shoots with people at the time. So if you find yourself in that situation, I feel like one thing to really give you, the photographer, a good idea of what you want to what you want to draw out is asking the cosplayer, what part of your costume do you like the most, or what part of the costume do you want to show off the most? And let's see, in her case, she was like, well, I worked really hard on these arm guards and also, you know, these accessories. So I definitely took photos where those were the most prominent aspects. And for my part, like, it didn't really matter that I was taking photos specifically of like her arm guards or anything, but just the fact that I had that idea I had that suggestion of like, okay, let's try something new. Let's try to frame it in a way where you're showing off your arm guards by making sure that your right side is facing me and you have your hand on your hip. Like that itself just suggests how to position the subject and how to make them, you know, like be able to show off and be able to feel confident about both themselves and about the cosplay that they made. yeah, same with this. So I showed this earlier, but particularly in this one, I was trying to show off this half of her cosplay. And in the same vein, I had her on a different plane than me, by which I mean I was lower than her on the stairs. But that gives you a different angle as opposed to like head on when you're just like looking at them on at a plane wall. So again, like by consciously as a photographer wanting to emphasize certain parts of their cosplay, gives you a lot more ideas as to how you want them to pose or how you want to frame the photo. Like, you know, if for example, if she wanted me or if I wanted to emphasize maybe like this half of her cosplay, she would be turned the other way, and you know that's a minor thing, but that's actually that would make a completely different photo. Just having her turn the other way, because people just like, even if people are symmetrical and if it's just like one side or the other, people actually unconsciously feel like they have a good side or a bad side, and they kind of act differently based on what side is facing the camera or just like how they're oriented. So like really just get a lot of angles from them and get a lot of ideas and just take a lot of pictures and not, you know, I'm just showing, actually I just happen to be showing you the ones that I wanted to post online, the ones I thought were really good. But from each of these, there were like 100 more that I ended up deleting because they weren't that great, but it doesn't matter, like digital film doesn't cost you anything at all. So take a whole lot of photos and be open to experimenting, both yourself as a photographer and the kind of like framing and the kind of compositions that you make, and also experimenting and suggesting to the subject things to do. It'll obviously depend on what kind of relationship you have with the subject, like how well you know them, if they're a good friend or if they're just someone you just met. But a lot of times, it helps to be kind of like daring, to kind of like, you know, to suggest something that's like, a pose that sounds like really silly, but it gets you in a different mood, and it might, even if it doesn't make a good photo, it'll definitely bring up the energy in this kind of like photographer cosplayer relationship that is what you're trying to capture on film. Hey Tommy, can you plug in my thing? It's not charged up.
It wasn't working correctly, I think. Anyway, but
I think I will ask. Let's give it a try. Not a lot of battery.
How's that battery?
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Is it charging?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, good. It was making weird feedback, so I wasn't sure.
Okay, thanks. Let's see. So, once you have your pictures, depending on like how super into cosplay photography you are, but you know, you generally want your pictures to be seen, right? Obviously by the people that you took the pictures of, but just like everyone, like there's this huge anime and cosplay community in the internet, and there's a lot of people like sharing cosplay photos on Facebook all the time, and it's cool to be a part of that. It's, you know, if you want to put the time into this, it's really cool to be a part of that. Like for myself, I have a Facebook page. It's a fan page. It's different from a profile. It's a Facebook fan page where I specifically put all my photography, just so it's all in one place, and so people can follow and kind of see when I post new stuff. But at the same time, you can do that. There's a lot of services for putting up either your photographs or just your art in general. DeviantArt is a pretty popular one that's been around for a really long time. It hosts a lot of artists who just publish their own stuff, and you can get critiques and comments and stuff. But I think more importantly is having all of your photographs in one place, just to link to or just to show anyone. Because even when you get started out taking cosplay photos, even after like 2 or 3 cons, you start to amass a lot of photos, and you don't want to like, you don't want it to be hard. We don't want it to be hard for people to find photos that you took just like a year ago. And for me, that was the case. Like I used to host them on a really plain image hosting site like PhotoBucket or something, but by not having a gallery, it was a lot harder to show people photos, or even just to go back to old photos that I wanted to like bring up again. So I feel like as a photographer, even if you're not super interested in like, you know, getting out there or making a name for yourself or anything, it helps a lot to post all your photos on one service or on one website or in one place, and just to have them in one place. And there's a couple of other examples. WorldCosplay.net is one, and Cure, I forgot what website it is. I think it's like curecosplay.com or something. But those are websites and cosplayer communities specifically for people to either post cosplay of themselves or just photos that they took. And yeah, so like the point is kind of like, it's really cool and helpful to see other people's work and to be in a community and to have people like what you take pictures of, you know, like even if, like I don't really, I'm not trying to be famous or anything, but just having like my pictures on a Facebook page is really cool, because after I work really hard on them, like a bunch of people comment on them and they click like. So that's just, you know, it's very encouraging as a photographer, and it makes me want to do more, and it makes me want to come back and like outdo myself and, you know, be a better photographer. So let's see. I guess we're almost out of time. So if any of you guys have any questions at all, I am open to them. Not, I can go into, let's see.
Do you sell your photos? Is this like a sustaining?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, so I do freelance photography on my own, like headshots and stuff. And I've tried in the past to charge for cosplay photographs, but I think it's kind of hard. Like, some people can do it, but I feel like for one, you'll find that conventions and cosplayers are kind of a community, so you kind of have everyone knowing everyone, and that's really helpful in getting to know people. But at the same time, there's like a ton of people who will just take photos as a hobby, and essentially who are really good photographers will just do it for free. So you know, there's a lot of it's hard to be like, well, I can take really pretty good pictures, but I want, you know, I'm gonna charge for it. Whereas opposed to like someone who can take as good pictures for free. Maybe they're harder to book, like harder to get scheduled with. But so basically, in my experience, a lot of times cosplay photography is actually very strictly just like either a hobby or like an artistic endeavor. You can definitely kind of springboard off that into other forms of photography or other forms of like social media interaction, and you know, look for work in that place. I think it's super hard to sustain yourself financially in cosplay photography, especially because the people that you're taking pictures of are also like young kids who spend all their money on the costumes that they're making anyway, right? So like I just feel bad charging for them anyway. Yeah.
This is more or less a question pertaining to photography itself. Any conventions like this in North America other than Comic-Con?
Like this anime convention?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot. Are you from California?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a ton. California in particular has a whole lot. The largest anime convention in North America is called Anime Expo. That's held in Los Angeles every summer, every July. That's a really huge one, and there's like you literally can't walk a couple of steps without finding an amazing cosplay to take a picture of. Like,
it's also 6 hours.
It is. It's far, right? So you're Northern California. There's AOD is a smaller example one. Have you heard of Fanime?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, that's a bigger one. I'd say it's kind of on par with Anime Expo. Like it's not as huge, but I like it a lot more in that sense because it's more kind of fan based and a lot less corporate. But Fanime is in San Jose, and that's like an hour from San Francisco. And yeah, there's a lot of cosplayers there, and there's a lot of opportunities to take pictures. And there's two in Sacramento every year called Sac Anime. Those are pretty fun. I go to those as well. They find a lot of quality cosplay there. But basically, like, I think there's on cosplay.com or cosplay.net or one of those self-named sites. There's there's community for cosplayers, but also there is a list of all the conventions that are around, and you can actually search by state and by location. So definitely check that out. Yeah, like in recent times, there's a ton of conventions if you spend the time to look for them, and they're pretty affordable for the most part. Or actually, like the interesting thing about cosplay photography is that you actually don't even need to pay for the convention itself, because most of the time, cosplayers are just kind of anywhere. They're not in places that are sealed off for badge owners or like, for conventions too. Let's see. Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you have like a favorite lens that you use every time?
Yeah. So if you get it, yeah. For people getting into lenses and like more advanced photography, I can talk about my technical setup. A really standard and cheap lens that if you own an SLR camera that really any owner should have is a 50mm, and that's a really common one. They're really inexpensive. It's a lens that doesn't zoom. 15mm is it's kind of close up, but not terribly, and it's really good for portrait photography, and it gives you a really nice depth of field. If I can find it, why not? I should probably wrap up. But so at 15mm, I have one thing that I find, like if you end up spending a lot of money on camera equipment, is a wider lens. I use one that goes down to 16mm, like a 14 or 11 to 16mm. And by that I mean it's something that is very wide angle, and you can get the whole body of the subject, which I find is super helpful in cosplay photography. A lot of times I get the top to bottom of the costume. Bring up like
So
like
everybody.
Like it'll stretch the photo, like as you can tell. Like her body and her head is kind of like stretched out, but at the same time, it gives it kind of, it's more interesting. You're not going for like photorealistic most of the time because they're portraying a character, so it's not that much of a problem. So just having a wide angle lets you fit the entire character into it. That's super helpful, I think, for cosplay photography.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, thanks everyone.